get back to Target. I think they're making a great move, right? In Texas and Florida, they've got higher concentration of stores, and they're both positive towards carrying THC. So it's a great move. Also, we talked about why they're doing it now with 6 months to go. And if you think about the seasonality of Beval, we're about to hit Christmas time. July 4th weekend is the Christmas time of Beval. So it makes sense that they are going to try and go to highly dense places with lots of people. They have lots of stores to hit that July.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 137 of High Spirits, the show where cannabis and beverage industry insiders pull back the curtain on what's actually happening in the market. I'm Ben Larson.
And I'm Anna Ray Grabstein. And every
Tuesday,
every Tuesday, we seek to have the kind of conversations that matter, the ones happening in the boardrooms and the back hallways.
It is May 12th, 2026. And we have an incredible guest for you today. We have Jason Zielinski of Nielsen IQ. We're going to dig into everything data, the beverage category, convenience, and all things happening in the marketplace. Before we get there, Anna Ray, how's your week going?
It's good. It feels like it barely started. The weekend was really busy. I went to a pirate birthday party on Saturday for a toddler. It was great Mother's Day, too. Were you good to your wife on Sunday?
I think so. I didn't see her for a day, and I was surrounded by a bunch of kids and reorganized our garage, which is filled with baby stuff. Yeah, I was very tired by the end of the day. She seemed happy, so I think I did my duty.
Amazing. Awesome. But let's get started with some cannabis industry news, shall we?
Let's show.
All right. I saw that Cultivated broke the story this morning that the owner of MJ Biz, which has been Emerald X, sells their whole portfolio to a business called Apollo Global Management. They're a large asset manager. And Apollo is also acquiring another event business called QuestX, and they're going to combine it with Emerald. It remains to be seen what will happen with MJ BizCon. They haven't said anything positive or negative, but also of note, Emily Lewis, who many people in the industry have known as the SVP of MJ Biz, recently announced that she had left the company a couple weeks ago. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Just yesterday, people were calling me to plan events for Vegas, and little questionable. Who knows?
Yeah. I, for some reason, thought that MJ Biz had already been through this, and now I'm questioning my finger on the pulse of history here. But I think the biggest gripe of MJ Biz over the last several years has been that losing of the pulse of what's going on in the industry. And hearing that a private equity firm is going to come in and take it over and combine it with something that's not cannabis, they're going to have to try really hard to re-engage the community, and I don't know if that's the solution. So Godspeed, good luck. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll still probably be in Vegas in November or December, whenever it's happening. But my confidence in it being successful from a business perspective, it's not high.
Yeah, I agree. It's complicated because there's a level of tradition. So many of us have been going to Vegas after Thanksgiving to see our peers for so many years that it just becomes muscle memory. But the event itself hasn't really delivered. And most of us have been not spending a lot of time there over the course of the other years and doing other types of events. And that doesn't support the MJ Biz business necessarily, but we got to get our own business done, right?
That's right.
Great.
Yeah.
Let's move on to our next story. Many people have probably seen the headlines. They've been in lots of mainstream media that Target is betting big on THC beverages and is expanding, to 300 plus stores across 3 states. Target confirmed that it's expanding its hemp-derived THC beverage program beyond Minnesota and is rolling out to over 300 stores across Florida, Texas, and Illinois. The company is stocking beverages up to 10 milligrams, and that is actually double the potency of its initial beta launch in Minnesota. And the move is striking for its timing, since there is a federal provision that's going into effect in November that would effectively prohibit these beverages. And the fact that this $107 billion retailer is expanding into the category 6 months before a potential federal ban, I don't know. I'd say it's either a calculated hedge, a bet on a congressional delay, or both.
Yes, and I'm elated, right? To get Target more invested in the space just draws more eyeballs, not only their own, but the consumers, right? And it there's also a parallel effort happening right now of trying to push the grassroots recognition of like, this category that you do enjoy is at threat of going away. And so more exposure for programs like that, it's only going to help, draw more focus to the conversation in the coming months. And it's critical right now. We're anticipating more effort from a legislative standpoint in getting language across that helps preserve this category. I don't know. It's still a weird place. I've seen all the LinkedIn posts, and sitting in California, it's very depressing to see Target having end caps of THC beverages and still not to be able to get anything here in California.
Well, the last few weeks we've really focused on the rescheduling news, which is much more about the regulated and adult use cannabis markets. But this is an important conversation to have, and we have a great guest lined up to talk about it, because the reality is that Target is not going to take this risk and give these products shelf space if they don't think that there is real opportunity. And even with a 6 month potential window that could close at the end, Target thinks that it's worth it for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that just speaks to how important and impactful this category has become and how many consumers are comfortable and curious with the category. So we're going to get to dive into more of that today with our guest.
Yes, amazing. Turns out people like to get high.
And
Especially in the
so
beverage
I
format.
yes.
Yeah. I think as we've talked about a lot, especially when we're talking about the dispensary channel and legacy consumers or just experienced consumers, they often explore well beyond the beverage category. But for the new consumers or those just looking for a beverage replacement, we're not talking about a replacement when it comes to cannabis products. We're talking about an adult beverage alternative. And the consumer is very much looking for that. We've seen all the trends in alcohol. People are searching for something different. And it turns out, at least in my own journey, I have a challenge paying top dollar for something that has just flavoring in it. No offense to all the great non-alc products out there, but I just left always wanting a little something. And it turns out THC is a good little something.
A little something. Let's,
So-
uh, let's cue up our guest because he's going to be able to give us lots more information on this. Today's guest has spent 2 decades at the intersection of retail and data, starting with a decade in merchandise operations at Walmart and Sam's Club, then building expertise at Nielsen IQ, working with leading retailers across grocery, drug, and convenience channels. He's now the VP of North American Retail at Nielsen IQ and has become one of the loudest voices making sense of the THC beverage explosion in mainstream retail. He recently presented data that had the industry buzzing at the CSP Cannabis Forum, and we wanted to invite him here to talk us through it. So we are really excited to welcome Jason Zielinski to the show. Welcome, Jason.
Awesome. Thanks, Anna Ray. And I was like, man, who is this guy? We should all be listening to him. Happy to be here.
Well, we should all be listening to you. I know it wasn't just at the CSP conference where you really started catching people's ears. We were talking about it at the CannaBev Summit at the beginning of the year. Just as people who have grown up in the cannabis industry, and we've always had this conversation about how hard data is. And like Nielsen was always like lauded as that's where we want to get to. And we had some early announcements in the space about partnerships with Headset. And yet still today, we still hear these challenges, especially in the cannabis space, but it's not just cannabis. And I think that's probably where is a good place to start the conversation is just a good foundation of understanding data and the different types of data out there. And so I guess I'll start with the question of why historically has data in cannabis been so hard, and how does that kind of translate and bleed over into an emerging market like hemp beverages?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. And so when we think about cannabis sold through traditional dispensaries, the big thing that we have found there is at first it was lack of a standardized payment system. And if you think about the way that Nielsen, how we get data and other data providers is usually versus getting shipment data, we get POS data. And then we get it from our retailers. We also have many other data sets where we're doing panel or web scraping or such, but the core business is based off of that POS data. In the dispensary space, POS data was a little hard to get at first, and you can make some partnerships. But then if you take it to the next step, once you get that POS data, you have to be able to decipher it. And so unlike the traditional CPG world where you have a UPC, universal product code on the majority of your products, it's a registered product, you know what it is. Cannabis products tended to be a little bit more lighter in the amount of information that would come with them, and they would not be standardized from one dispensary to another. So it was very, very difficult to try and aggregate that data to get the type of insights that a retailer or a manufacturer would use then to make a business case or explore the space more. You combine that with a little bit of, what is the appetite for major CPG to invest in trying to see those insights? And your tail becomes a bit long on, well, how long is it going to take us to get to that gold standard of.
So then, if cannabis data was a little bit messy, I'm wondering at what point did THC beverages derived from hemp in sort of non-cannabis regulated channels show up on your radar and make you think that this is something that we should be paying attention to and that Nielsen should be reporting on?
Yeah, that is a fantastic question. So it started showing up about 3 years ago. The sales started before then, but what typically will happen is we don't know what a product is because we don't have a relationship with that CPG vendor. When you think about the major pack bed vendors, before they launch a product, they send us all the information about that product. So by the time it comes through the register, we know exactly what it is. It falls neatly within our syndicated hierarchy and it's reported into the space. We had a lot of new launches at very regional players that were happening in grocery. Actually, grocery was one of the first spaces to get into not just hemp derived beverages, but they were doing a lot in CBD and other THC products in HBC. Actually, it was really like where we're seeing it. And because we didn't have those kind of relationships, it took a little bit longer for us to send an order, go find the product, and then start coding it. And at the time, the auditors weren't really paying attention that this has THC in it. This is a different kind of product. It was more of, this is a skin cream or this is a relaxation gummy or tincture or what have you. And it wasn't until about 2 years ago, so 2023, that beverages really started hitting the floor and beverages started hitting. And we could talk about why beverages has become this key way of ingestion for consumers. But when beverages started hitting, it was a lot easier to figure out what was different about these products. We started getting those THC codes. And then, Ben, you were talking about, I was at the Cannabis Forum 6 weeks ago, but I was at the Cold Forum a year ago. At that Cold Forum, I started saying, look, these are things we're seeing in the THC space. It's growing at like 300%. Anywhere it's being distributed, you're getting greater sales per item than you are in beer. It's totally incremental. When I started saying those things, a lot of the manufacturers started coming to Nielsen, hey, please take my product images, please code my products. And when that happened, then we're off to the races because now we have what I would say a very, very good product set of just about everything that's selling as far as beverages goes. We also have good representation in the the vapes and the papers. We are seeing THC have direct paper out there, the gummies and other THC products. But it's been in the past year that we've been really able to get that really good data. So I think I have to go back full circle into what the dispensaries. We still have yet to get that kind of relationships with the manufacturers that are distributing the cannabis produced products that we do now in that THC hemp derived space.
Awesome. Just because even I had a steep learning curve in this and just understanding the sections of retail. You mentioned grocery and how that kind of really kicked things off. And then we hear about liquor and convenience. And
Mhm.
are those three do those three kind of cover the major
Yes.
retail categories? And what are the main difference between those? Like, how do you clearly draw the lines as a layperson, our audience, so to speak, that doesn't live this every day?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, those three channels are where we see now, of course, mass is becoming quickly the fourth channel because yeah, you talked about Target. And so we would consider Target a mass retailer. And so there is now a fourth player, a fourth horse in the race, I guess we could say. But if we look at like, what's the definition of these channels? So the liquor channel it's stores that primarily 90% or more of their business is based in the BevAl space. So that's what a liquor store is. And you could think of Total Wine and More, Bevmo, ABC Liquors. Those are like the bigger chains. And of course, there's lots of mom and pop liquor stores out there. The convenience store is a smaller format store. So it's something between 750 square feet to shy of 10,000, although there are some that are making these 60,000 travel center monstrosities, we could say. But, the convenience store is that smaller format store, may or may not have gas. It's going to be open extended hours. And then the selection of goods that you would find inside of it. But you have the six major categories of tobacco and candy and salty snacks and packed bev and beer, of course. And then you have some household items. Grocery, that would be your standard supermarket. So if you're thinking about, the Krogers of the world, I'll just go Krogers. That I think be a nationally recognized brand. It's the grocery store.
Hmm. Hmm. And then that growth rate that you spoke to, are we seeing that across all these various categories? Is there one where maybe it's performing better than the other?
Yeah, so we could talk about absolute volume, and then we could talk about the growth state that we're here in 2026. So if we
Hmm.
think about absolute volume, the liquor channel is by far the largest volume. They were early entrants, and they have a lot more control over their sets, of course, age gated to walk in. And they really embrace that THC space. And they are selling more THC beverages than the other outlets combined. Right now, their growth is kind of, it's still going, but it's plateauing. But that's because they got into the game a long time ago. By a long time ago, like which seems so long ago, right? And when you think about grocery, there were some early regional adopters, and they have started to plateau. Those who are offering this product 2 years ago are offering, and there hasn't been a lot of increased distribution, in that channel. So they're starting to, they're still showing positive increases, which is great in the retail world today, but they're not growing at the 100, the 200%. Then we look at the convenience channel. The convenience channel is still posting like triple digit growth. That is really coming through distribution. So if you read the news, you can see, Circle K, the number two player in the US, they're continuing to go into more and more, their like Target is. And other convenience retailers are still adding this to their set that did not have it before. And so if we look at the market today, it's actually only about 10% of convenience is carrying a THC beverage. That sounds like a really low number, but you got to remember, like half the country, you can't carry a THC beverage in convenience anyway. So, so 10% is, it's 10% of half. And if we look inside the states that it is legal, it's like 52. So it's roughly half of convenience stores are selling where it's legal. But
Hmm.
that distribution like it continues to grow. Every quarter I'm thinking it's going up like a half a point of distribution. It's getting into more doors, and as it gets into more doors, it becomes more normalized. People get more comfortable, and and they're engaging with the product. And then the last was mass. That's mass retailers, so that would be your Walmart, your Targets of the world. And now, yeah, Target's in the game. And you talked about the news that came out, I think, late last week, early this week, and I think it's a great move on their part, and I'm happy to talk about it. But yeah, those are the channels that we're measuring.
Amazing. Well, you're getting our brains wet with a little bit of data. I wanted to talk about more. I've got some data that you guys provided that shows that 28% of US adults have tried a cannabis infused beverage and that 50% of US adults would be interested in trying a cannabis beverage. And that comes up to about 74 million adults have tried these type of beverages, and then 130 million would be interested. But you actually know what those people are purchasing, what the potency looks like, what the pack size looks like, frequency. Love for you to dive in and give us some of what you consider to be the most impactful arguments that show how important this category has been over the past 12 months and what it's becoming right now, even in the face of potential prohibition.
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you break down the types of THC, and I'm gonna focus in on beverages right now. There are other products that are in the store, so the gummies, the vapes, and what have you. But we do find that beverages has taken off and is the preferred way that consumers want to ingest or imbibe THC products, and that makes total sense, by the way. And I'm going to go on a tangent. I'll come back to you just for a second, but if you look at like packaged beverage, what's going on in non-alc or non-THC packaged beverage, and you're looking at like the lows in a rapid hydration or high protein. Protein is getting into everything. Protein's been around for decades, right? Powdered whey protein has been something that back in the 80s that you buy. And why is it now that it's getting to beverages? Because it's easy. People could have done it these other ways, but as soon as you put it into a beverage, it quickly becomes the way that that people are just, they normalize part of a routine. I just walk in, grab it, I drink it, and this is great. I think THC is following in that suit of like, I don't want to say habitual, but like a way, this easy barrier to entry of like how I could this product. Right. So they're consuming THC beverages, and when we kind of break that down of like what kind of beverages are they looking to consume or how are they looking to consume it? Once again, a year ago when it was still kind of early in the convenience space, in the grocery space, we found out that 5 milligrams was the way that the majority of the sales were going. It was over 35% of the sales were 5 milligrams. Today, however, we're finding that 10 milligram is the way that they would. I think that's distribution. Once again, that is just a form of like when people were dipping in their toes, they went for that really low dose of 5 milligrams. But since then, it's more normalized, can be more accepted. People have started doing that trial and repeat, and they're moving into that 10 milligrams, and that we're finding is to be like that place where it's the most comfort and we're getting the most amount of sales. Going by target, what are they doing? Oh yeah, they're capping it at 10 milligrams. When we think about like the type of drinks that they're drinking, we're finding that soda right now is the primary way that people are consuming. They're aligning it with other packaged beverages that they find in the cooler. After soda, it gets into seltzers, then we get into teas and mocktails. But soda is the primary way, and then it's a 12-ounce can, right? That's I already think it's a 12-ounce can. Actually, I don't want that number. I might have to check. I don't have that on the top, but I think it's the 12 or 16-ounce can is the way that they're looking at it. And when you're at convenience, they want it cold. Now that's just an extension of the concept of the cold vault that convenience is very about. I'm going to immediately consume whatever I'm buying. By immediate, I mean within an hour, not that they're gonna leave the door and they're gonna start consuming. Although you never know, but they're gonna buy they're gonna buy this product within the hour, and they want it cold, which is another reason why convenient. Once they started distributing the product, saw great success. Early on in convenience, there actually was a bunch of stumbles. They were doing the bigger 4-packs that cost $30. They were warm. Customers, and they kind of sat on the shelf for a while before they really started getting into that mainstream.
The consuming within the hour of purchase is such an interesting opportunity. We've talked about this in the past just because, we don't have a lot of discovery opportunities with THC products historically, especially when we're relegated to the dispensary channels. Many of the laws that were implemented around the states didn't really think about where are people going to consume these. Like they weren't allowed to consume them on the street. Oftentimes they weren't even allowed to consume it in their own homes if they were renting. And so this concept of being able to walk into a convenience store, grab something, and then be consuming it within the hour is just a really interesting dynamic that gets us to that point where 50% of Americans do have the opportunity to try this. And so that's just really exciting. So you talked a lot about form factors and even kind of flavors. Let's talk about the consumer. Who are these people that are actually buying these? Is it the soccer moms that people always like to cater to, or is it everyone over 21, of course?
Of course.
Yeah. What are you guys seeing?
Yeah, it really is the cross section of America. So I'd love to tell you that there is this core consumer, and any given time period that we run the data, we basically get a cross section of America. If you think about the convenience store or the grocery store, everybody goes into a convenience store or a grocery store. I think it's 98% of America, is going to go into a convenience store, every month. You're gonna capture just about all of America. The same thing with groceries. Everybody's going to be shopping at a grocery store, and so you will get the millennials or the legal Gen Zs that can go in and buy this as they try and redefine their life and on how they're engaging in products that you bring to a party, or you're gonna be very social. As they're looking at that, they're engaging. But you also have the Gen Xers like myself, and you've got the baby boomers. We were giving a talk at the Nat show last year about what's happening in Beval. I was one of my thought leaders, and she was calling it, there's this she called it old ladies, these old ladies, and they call it their bitch juice, it's like, and they're drinking it too. So, I would love to tell you like, oh, hey, the demographic that you should be aiming for is a 35-year-old, Caucasian woman with 2 children, but it's everybody. Like you said, NRA, 50% of America wants to try this within the next year, and 50% of America has the ability to do so.
So let's dive into having the ability to do so and retailers making decisions to carry these products. We've alluded to Target. We talked about it at the top of the hour. It's a big deal. And there's still a lot of retailers that are not in the game yet. And a big part of what you do is try to help retailers identify trends, understand where there could be exciting new opportunities for them to grow and to better serve consumers, basically stay at the front of the line when it comes to what consumers are looking for. And I'm wondering what that's like for you right now as you and Nielsen IQ broadly are introducing this category to all these different channels of retailers. What is the key points that you're helping them to explain about what they can expect getting into the category? And then if you can weave that into what level of understanding do folks have about the policy challenges that are ahead for the category as well?
Yeah, so the big one is the regulation by state and then federally. So there are still some major retailers out there that have not quite become comfortable enough saying that this is legal federal, which is something that, we are a data company and we're an analytics company. And so I can give them the insights and but we're not lawyers, right? And we always recommend you got to talk to your lawyers. That's where we partner with some of the other like Kava, to bring in the data to say, look, you can do this, and you don't believe me. I mean, just look at your competitor; they're doing it. But also like navigating what state can they safely go into. And this is actually, you get back to Target. I think they're making a great move, right? Texas and Florida, they've got that's a higher concentration of stores for Target, and they're both positive towards carrying THC. So it's a great move. Also, we talked about why they're doing it now with 6 months to go. And if you think about the seasonality of Beval, we're about to hit Christmas time. July 4th weekend is the Christmas time of Beval. So it makes sense that they are going to try and go to highly dense places with lots of people. They have lots of stores before to hit that July. What happens after July? We'll all see. But everybody's going to be racing to get to that July because that's going to be the Christmas for the category. Okay, so all right, back to what we can tell the retailer. So really, are you in a location that would allow this and is favorable to you? Because there is some states that even though THC might be legal, it's not legal for convenience to carry it. Maybe it's just liquor that can carry it, or maybe it's just grocery. And there's a lot of, and then there's also shifting plates that are happening state by state. Once again, I think Florida is just a great state, and THC, I would say, stable for quite a while. And so that makes it a great move. So what do we do is we go in and we try and tell them, look, this is a trend. It is still growing. And if you look at kind of the incrementality of it all, and that's really what retailers want to know. They want to know, is this incremental, or am I just robbing Peter to pay Paul? If I put this on the shelf, am I just like taking away from equal dollars and units of my beer product or my spirit or wine? They just come in and buy THC. Have I really gained anything? And so we are showing them that, no, this is an incremental sale. Like there's been some softness in some of the Beval categories, and that's not just a THC phenomenon. The THC is not coming in all of the softness that you're seeing is due to THC. There's a little bit of that. Yeah, we're seeing some transference, but the THC customer can be net new and can be incremental. And we also have done a lot of studies where mostly on premise though, and we find that the cannabis user, not just THC, but the cannabis user, what's the number one thing they do? They drink beer. It's like that's after they consume some cannabis, that they then go drink beer. So you can actually build a basket and you can get total incrementality out of it. And that's what the retailers kind of want to know is like, hey, is incremental? First, they want to know, am I getting in trouble for doing it? Once you get past that barrier, they want to know is it incremental, and then they have to start working it in. Well, where do I cut? And that's where they like get outside this THC space. We get into overall category management of like, how do you find the space, especially when you're at a convenience store? I mean, Target, endless shelf. Kroger, endless shelf. They've got all the space in the world. Like you're talking about 5,000 square feet, and 6 categories make up 80% of your business. You really got to get in there and justify, hey, how do I add this product? And then you get to that next stage of, well, how's it going to get to my store? And so I think that there's been a lot of the distributors have started putting this on their trucks, which is great. We're not at 3-tier yet, but it's now on those trucks. You can get them to distribute it to your store. And we're finding that the manufacturers who have the relationship going with those distribution partners that are already going to the stores, those are the ones who are kind of rising to the top because, again, the retailer is more comfortable. I'm not saying that you can't do direct to the store. If you do that, then you have to have some sort of a program of like, well, how's it going to get on the shelf? Convenience stores, again, that's my specialty. You don't have the man hours to continually stock, so they're going to need help getting this product up and making sure it's merchandised in a way that resonates with the customer. It's in a space that you can clearly identify that it's a THC product, that it's not an energy drink, or it's not an RTD, and so that the person who buys it is consuming it with the knowledge that yes, I am buying a THC beverage. I know I just kind of went all over the place on that one, but I hope
It's great. Yeah. As a follow up, I'm thinking if I was a convenience store who heard your pitch and thought, okay, now it's finally time, I'm ready to explore THC beverages, would you give them direction in terms of how to build that shelf, in terms of what are the different categories or brands that would potentially fit in their region? Who are the brands that are winning with different types of consumers? How do they choose where to start? Or are they just leaning on the distributor to say, this is what's on our truck, so here's what we're going to put on your shelf?
Yeah. It can go either way, right? So some will say I have a category captain and they'll be like, I'm just going to lean on my category captain. Other convenience retailers or grocery retailers are like, no, I own my set. It's my set. And so then they start looking at our data. They use some of our advanced analytics. And what they can then do is they can then make that justification of, okay, what categories can I shrink and not lose sales? And we have those type of analytics where we can show that if you reduce this one product, all the demand of that product just shifts into another one. You're not actually going to lose a customer. And then you could bring in this incremental product, which is going to add a customer. And so we won't draw their planogram for them, although we do have solutions that will draw the planogram if they so choose, but usually don't use our data to find out what is selling in my area. And so one of the things that we recently launched was we really got into state granularity because THC is kind of falling in those lines, Beval, where every state has its own product. So you may have like a really popular soda brand. You've got a UPC for every single state because they actually have to comply to that state's regulations. And so in that sense, we were able to show a retailer, in the state of Georgia, this is what's selling. This is what the customers, if you have this product on your shelf, they're more likely to be comfortable with it because they've seen it on other shelves. Here's the long tail. If you want to go after, somebody that may not have that distribution and get into a new player kind of relationship. And they trust us with that data because it's not that the distributors are evil or not telling the truth, but again, we're an unbiased third party. We don't have real skin in the game of trying to sell one product versus another. We're going to give you the data as it lays, and then we're going to help you make the decision that's best for your stores.
The aspect of the fragmentation of all the regulations across the states is really interesting. I was talking to one of the brands and they said every time they launch a new SKU, it's actually 6 or more because of the different labeling, the different serving and potency requirements. So yeah, just really interested to think how that explodes from a data perspective.
That's yeah. You think about root beer, you can have this root beer THC beverage, right? But there's 26 versions of that one root beer beverage, which we've coded them all, right? But then we have to
Mhm.
aggregate them all to say, okay, root beer is selling at like it is like the one of the top flavors that people are engaging in. Sorry, Ben, I didn't cut you off.
Oh, no, that's great. I do want to go back to this incremental growth that this is driving, because I think that was one of the big hurdles the category faced early on, and often in the form of opposition from the alcohol industry. But it does seem like that message has gotten across to the alcohol industry, largely, especially with distributors and retailers, that this is incremental growth on top of alcohol. And at the same CSP event that we were at a couple months ago, we had retailers showing slides where their alcohol sales actually increased alongside the THC beverages increasing. So, setting alcohol aside, there's a bunch of other categories, and one of the opportunities and challenges that cannabis faces is it often gets dropped into many different buckets, be it functional or wellness or that kind of thing. And I'm curious, from your perspective, how are these different beverage categories influencing the opportunity for the THC beverage category?
Yeah, that's let's see if I can unpack this question for you. So the thing that we right now we have THC set up as an attribute versus a full category, and so it depends on how we slice the data. The majority of it falls under what we call beverages, and so it's just in that kind of the same place that carbonated beverage or water would fall in. The majority of THC products fall there. There are some that fall under HBC, even though they are beverage, and because of the claims that they're making and like to help you sleep or to relax you, there are some of these THC beverages that are really getting into that health and wellness space, and so they're falling under there, and so that's why if you're talking about trying to pull THC data. Get yourself a really good data scientist that can help you out with that one, because you just want to make sure that you're not leaving anything on the ground when you're trying to aggregate, and find out what is really selling in the THC space. As far as what are people trying to solve for, or what are they like, why are they using this, and you think about the functionality. The number one thing we found out in our studies, not from product claims, but we've asked people, why are you drinking this beverage? And the majority of them say relaxation. That's the number one thing that we get. And then the second one is, like a more of a social, and using this to do something social. But the top reason is actually relaxation.
So, as it relates to state by state regulation and Target choosing these states that it just decided to launch into, we know that hemp beverages, like regulated cannabis, have really started to become more of a state by state business, different from the way that it started and different from a lot of the excitement at the beginning was about that, oh, there isn't state by state regulations. And so we can just have one label and be able to do interstate commerce and move around. And it's become a little more complicated. Manufacturing is still able to travel over state lines. But outside of the states specifically that Target just chose, I'm wondering if you can talk about some of the biggest and most popular states of where these beverages have taken hold, and maybe what that says about the consumers in those states, or maybe it's the regulatory environment, but where are these things hottest and most popular?
Yeah, you got it. I don't have my full state list in front of me, but I'll give you like some of the top ones, right? And I'm just gonna go out on the limb and just say, hey, I'm from the great state of Maine. That's where I live, and Maine is actually a top state. So I'm just gonna plug Maine. Here we go. Other great states. North Carolina is a state that's in the top five. Minnesota is a state that's in the top five. Georgia is in the top five. So what we see if we, I know I don't have the map in front of me, but I can visualize it, is we've got like this kind of like Atlantic corridor. The states along the Atlantic where it's legal are doing very well, and Minnesota is doing really well. And one of the things you talked about, Ben, before is when we're looking at state performance, when Beval has been a little soft across the nation, and Minnesota being one of these top THC states, we're actually finding that beer is now making this comeback in Minnesota. So they're both showing positive increases. So just to kind of tack on to what you were saying there, whereas the entire category is still being a little bit soft, but there are some states where even though that's a top THC state, still growing, we're finding that beer is also growing in the state as well.
So, we obviously have talked about and all know about this kind of impending deadline of November 12th, right? And it's very mixed messaging because it's, you have Target and convenience pouring in and people are excited about growth. It sounds like it's still growing, but I'm sure people are looking at the data and adapting and preparing for either the scenario where this category gets saved or the category goes away. And are you seeing any adjustments here at the beginning of the year? Or are we still at the beginning of the year? I guess it's May now. Towards the middle of the year, are people starting to adjust the way that they look at the data and use it to start to prepare for any potential change?
Yeah. What we do is, we measure, how many doors that the product is in, so distribution. And when we look at the main channels that we're covering, so the four that we said at the beginning of the hour, so in liquor, in convenience, in grocery, and in mass, those numbers are just going up. They every week they're like going up just like a tenth of a point, a tenth of a point, a tenth of a point. We have yet to see the distribution numbers go down. So they're just getting into more doors now. Not only that, we have total distribution points. So how many products are they putting on the shelf? They're actually putting more products on the shelf too. So we're seeing breadth and depth of the product continue to grow. My belief is that that's gonna ride at least until July 4th. No matter what happens, unless there's a complete ban that just comes out of nowhere, no matter what happens, I believe that we will get at least through the first couple weeks of July, because again, that's going to be Christmas for the category.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, that's when we're really going to see what's going to happen, because if you think about, how long will it take a retailer to get out of a product, they'll probably give themselves a 3-month window. So if we're kind of walking backwards, then August is going to be that month that's really going to be telling. We don't know what's going to happen by August, then retailers will probably start pulling back and working on their exit strategies.
That makes sense. Yeah, it's good to keep July 4th in mind as an important benchmark.
How invested is Nielsen in any type of policy outcome? Are you guys getting involved in DC, locking arms with other trade groups that are trying to protect the category, or at a minimum, just tracking it? What does that look like?
Yeah. So, as I said somewhere in the call, we're the unbiased third party, and that's kind of where we have to stay. So I will go out on the as my personal opinion, not a representative of the company. I believe in the category, and I fully support it. But Nielsen IQ itself, we are here to measure. We are here to show the world what the customer wants. There are entities out there like HABA or NACS or whoever, they use our data, and if they want to use our data to show legislation like the growth and the opportunity and and the consumer, then we share that data. But as far as us using a political action group to make a stand on it, no, we don't.
But you might make predictions. If I looked at data all day, every day, I might, whether it's a Nielsen stance or otherwise, let's approach it a different way. So one of the conversations that we have a lot within the category is like the inevitability of it. Like we hear these numbers, we see the interest, and whether it happens by November or 2 years from now, like the category seems like it has draw, right? And generally in this country, the consumer eventually gets what they want. And so that being true, and we've heard numbers, whether it's a $250 million or $1 billion in sales, somewhere there. It's a big range, but that's what we've heard: $250 million to $1 billion. If that's at the current, what do you see based on how you've seen trends of different categories through all these different retail outlets over the years? How big do you think this industry can get? We're hearing crazy numbers, 1 in 4 people trying it, 1 out of, or half the country wanting to try it, the sell-through rate, the growth rate. If we were to fast forward past, if we were to fast forward past the next, say, 3 years, what do you imagine the opportunity being here?
Yeah, so I had a little bit of a technical difficulty, but I'm pretty sure you're asking me to predict the THC beverage market in the United States. Um, and so I
Yes.
think that fantastic, right? All right, so if we do real back of the napkin math, right, and let's say we get to 100% distribution and acceptance of the product, so I can easily see where the number is like 5 billion. That's going to be my number, right? That I would go to in the convenience space. Convenience making up half of what the XAOC, the all other channels are doing. So okay, that's another 5 billion, right? Liquor, I don't think that liquor, has that runway, to increase, that much more. But let's just say you get another billion, $11 billion. There you go. That's your number, $11 billion.
11 billion.
And I get
All
that
right.
just
Good
by
number.
how important. Yeah, well, I look at it just like kind of taking the beer and like what that's the size of that beer category and how it's interacting with THC. That's kind of how I get there. And then I just look at, where's, how much sales we're getting with the distribution we have today. You drag that out, probably get to $11 billion. With again, that's 100% distribution. Everybody is holding hands, and it, it's being, there's no like certain channels are getting locked down and out of other channels. Because when you lock out channels, and you decrease distribution, of course, you decrease exposure and you decrease sales.
If the November ban stays and it takes some other policy process following November for the category to be reinstated, because I'm sure that there's a lot of people that it won't be ready to give up and will keep fighting to be able to reintroduce these products. How much does that hurt the opportunity and the inevitability of that $11 billion market opportunity in terms of if we go dark and the cans leave the shelf and it
Mhm.
takes some amount of time to come back? What do you think that looks like? How much does it really hurt it?
Oh, well, a lot. So what will happen? The ban will go into place, and there will be those manufacturers that will be able to adjust and survive off of the dispensary model. Where they, there were cannabis beverage and THC beverages in the traditional
Mm.
dispensaries before at the state level. So there will be those who will be able to survive off that model. The rest will have to fold. They'll have to close their doors because they just, with no sales, you can't maintain. And what that'll do is once we then get back into the legality of it all, we're gonna have to start over because some of the production and capabilities will have, and the distribution network agreements will not be in place. So that'll put it back by like a year. So let's say the ban happens, and then 2 years down the road, we wake up and we find out that this was the right thing or that was the wrong thing to do. And the right thing to do is, stop this prohibition, like what we're doing today or what we're going to do. Then it would probably take, another 2 years of ramp up, to get things on the shelves, get retailers to engage back in it. And then another couple of years to really get back mainstream. So what you would do is you would turn this 3 year to 11 billion to 7 years to 11 billion. Is probably what would happen. Back to the napkin math.
What do you think's going to happen? Just out of curiosity.
I can tell you what I hope is going to happen. If you're asking me to predict politics and I was accurate in doing so, I'd be on a different podcast.
I'm just taking a poll.
I'm going to put out into the universe that I am hoping that cooler heads will prevail. They'll see, A, this is what their constituents want, and B, there is revenue here. So it's a double whammy. It's like, we have the ability to have sales, get taxes, and it's what your consumers want. So hopefully those two things will, as I said, allow the cooler heads in Washington to prevail, and we'll get a pass. That's what I'm hoping for, but you never know.
Sales, taxes, jobs, revenue,
Yes,
all the things.
all the things, right? Exactly. Like, like we America has done very, very well at getting very, very focused, and we do need to, expand on the things that we do, in order to keep people employed.
There's been talk over the past year or so about, well, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. But it seems like the government's trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube pretty aggressively. And it's a hard thing to do, and it's going to make a mess. We'll see. Jason, you have shared some really great insight with us today, and we're really appreciative. It's time for our last call. So we want to turn the mic back to you one more time for a final message for our listeners, advice, call to action, closing thought. What do you got for us?
All right. Once again, I had that technical difficulties, but I think you're asking for that call to action. The call to action when we're talking about, I actually have more than one, right? So I'm going to make my public service announcement. I said at the beginning of the call, like, look, I've got exposure and all manufacturers started sending us product. And by product, just being images. If you're listening to this and you have not done that, please find Nielsen or look me up. I don't know if my contact is going to be in the show notes, and we will just make sure we get your product coded. If you're a retailer and you're thinking about getting into this category, the ones that have gotten into the category are seeing great success. Again, you can talk to me and I can help you out in making that business case. And then for the industries out there, the ones who are, Ben, you were talking about the ones who are on Capitol Hill, use data, use the data in addition to other strategies that you're using to try and convince, lawmakers to get us past that November deadline. And so I guess those are my 3 calls to action. Use the data, make sure the data is good. And if you need a business case, you can always talk to me.
Amazing. Jason Zielinski, Nielsen IQ, thank you so much for spending the last hour with us. It truly is a dream come true to hear just this discussion. If we were to rewind 5 years ago, I don't think any of us predicted that we would have been having these conversations, saying the names of the retailers that were talking about the growth rates and the access to consumers. It truly is just wonderful having your brain and perspective and talking about all of this. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Ben. Thank you, Anna Ray. I really appreciate this opportunity.
All right. Safe travels, and we'll talk to you again soon.
You're
All
right.
right, everybody.
Really cool. When I finished grad school and I was interviewing for internships at CPG companies, I remember one of the first questions was always, do you have experience with Nielsen data?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
remember getting so nervous. I'm just out of school. How do I have used something that I don't never had
Who's Nielsen? Yeah.
what is this? And now that they're covering THC, it's pretty neato.
Pretty neato. Yeah.
Hmm.
What do you folks think? Neato? Yeah. Thank you for watching as always. Thank you to our teams at Vertosa and Wolf Meyer, and of course our producer Eric Rossetti. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share, review, do all the things on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you watch us. Thank you for listening. As always, folks, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, keep your spirits high. Until next time, that's the show.